He told her she was nothing without him. As they signed the final papers, he leaned in and whispered, "Have fun on the bus, Alice. I hope that settlement covers your rent for at least a month." He laughed, adjusting the cufflink on his $5,000 suit, and walked out to his new life. She stood alone on the curb, defeated. But the car that pulled up to the curb wasn't a taxi. And the man who stepped out to open her door wasn't just anybody. In that single second, her ex-husband's world built on arrogance and lies came crashing down. The air in the Harris County family courthouse smelled like stale coffee and cheap disinfectant. It was the scent of endings, and for Alice Hayes, it was an odor she'd become sickeningly familiar with. She sat on a hard wooden bench, her hands clasped tightly around a worn leather portfolio. She wore her only suit, a simple navy blue set from a department store. It was 3 years old, but clean and pressed. It was the suit she'd bought for the interview she thought she was going to have before Mark convinced her that his career at Goldman Sachs needed to be the priority. "One of us has to support the other," he'd said, smiling that winning smile that once charmed her. "And let's be honest, darling, my bonus potential is a little higher than your art history degree." So she'd supported. She'd managed their home, hosted his insufferable clients, and edited his reports, shrinking her own world until it fit inside the luxury condo he paid for. The heavy door to the hallway swung open and he appeared. Mark Anderson. He wasn't alone. Clinging to his arm was Chloe, the 24-year-old paralegal he'd sworn was just a friend. Chloe's blonde hair was immaculate, her white suit aggressively bright in the drab hallway. She carried a $10,000 Hermes Birkin bag, a bag Alice recognized. It was the one she'd pointed out in a window 6 months ago, just before she found the hotel receipts. Mark spotted Alice. His face, which she had once loved, twisted into a smirk of pure, unadulterated arrogance. "Alice, darling," he boomed, letting his voice echo. People turned to look. "I almost didn't recognize you. Are you okay? You look tired." Alice stood, refusing to be looked down upon. "Hello, Mark. Chloe." Chloe gave her a pitying smile that was more insulting than a slap. "Alice, I'm so glad this is all finally getting settled. It must be such a relief for you." "Mr. Anderson," Mark's lawyer, a shark named Graves, interrupted. "Room 3B, we're on the docket." Mark nodded, but his eyes stayed locked on Alice. He leaned in as if sharing a secret, though he spoke just loud enough for the people nearby to hear. "Seriously, Al, you should have taken the first offer. This whole song and dance in court? It's just sad." "I just want what's fair, Mark," Alice said, her voice barely a whisper. "Fair." He laughed. "Fair is what I built. You were just there. Did you really think the judge would give you half for what, arranging flowers?" He adjusted his silk tie, a brilliant, obnoxious blue. "Look, I've got to run. Big meeting after this. The condo is being listed Monday. Chloe and I are moving to the new place in River Oaks. But don't worry." He patted his breast pocket. "Your little settlement check is all ready to go. Don't spend it all in one place. Maybe a nice studio apartment near the bus line." He and Chloe swept past, leaving the scent of expensive cologne and mockery in their wake. Alice felt her face burn, but she refused to cry. She'd done all her crying in the lonely apartment she'd been renting for 6 months, the one paid for by selling the last of her grandmother's jewelry. Inside the courtroom, it was worse. Mark's lawyer painted her as a bitter, lazy wife who contributed nothing. Mark on the stand listed his assets, his promotions, his long hours. He generously offered her a one-time payout of $50,000. "She has no claim to my bonuses or my portfolio," Mark stated calmly. Ms. Hayes hasn't worked in 5 years. She has no concept of what it takes to earn at my level." When the judge, looking bored, finally stamped the papers, the gavel felt like a hammer blow to Alice's chest. It was done. She was divorced. She was free. And she was by Mark's metrics worthless. He knew it. As they filed out, he walked past her and didn't even look at her. He just said one final thing. "Good luck, Alice. You're going to need it." Alice walked out of the courthouse into the bright, humid Houston sunlight. The light felt abrasive, too, revealing. She clutched her portfolio, the $50,000 settlement, feeling like 50,000 pieces of pity. It wouldn't last 6 months, not after she paid her lawyer. She heard them before she saw them, Mark and Chloe laughing as they bounded down the courthouse steps. "Dinner at Uchi tonight, baby," Mark said, pulling Chloe close and kissing her. "We're celebrating." "Oh, look," Chloe said, pointing with her chin. "She's still here." Alice was standing on the curb, her phone in her hand, trying to open the Uber app. Her hands were shaking. Mark strode over, his smile gone, replaced by a final look of condescension. "What's the matter, Alice?" "Can't get a signal. You know, for a $50,000 payout, you could probably afford a taxi. Or is that too much of a splurge?" Alice said nothing. She just stared ahead, focusing on the traffic. "God, you're pathetic," he hissed. "Look at you. You're a ghost. I did you a favor, Alice. I set you free. Now you can go back to whatever it is you did before you met me. Working in that dusty second-rate gallery." "Mark, leave her alone," Chloe said, not out of kindness but out of impatience. "Let's just go. My feet are hurting." "In a second, baby." Mark was enjoying this. This was his final victory. "I just want to see her off. Make sure she gets to her new life safely. Hope you brought a bus pass, Alice." He was about to say more when a car turned the corner. It wasn't just a car. It was a shadow. A silent, impossibly sleek piece of engineering that made Mark's brand new BMW 7 Series parked down the street look like a child's toy. It was a Bugatti Veyron painted in a matte midnight black that seemed to drink the sunlight. It moved with a predator's grace and pulled to a stop directly in front of Alice. Mark and Chloe froze. Holy. Mark breathed, his eyes wide. He knew cars. He knew that this vehicle was worth more than his condo. "Who the hell is that?" They stared, assuming it was for a judge or a visiting politician. Then the driver's side door opened. The man who stepped out was not a chauffeur. He was tall, dressed in a charcoal gray suit so perfectly tailored it looked more like an extension of his body than clothing. His hair was silver at the temples, and his face was sharp, angular, and utterly impassive. He radiated an aura of absolute, terrifying authority. Mark knew that face. He'd seen it on the cover of Forbes. He'd seen it in the Wall Street Journal. It was Damian Sterling, the ghost of Wall Street, the recluse tech and logistics billionaire. A man rumored to be worth over $50 billion. A man whose company Sterling Industries was a major client of Goldman Sachs. Mark's blood turned to ice. His mouth went dry. "No," he whispered. "It can't be." Damian Sterling didn't look at Mark. He didn't look at Chloe. He didn't acknowledge their existence. He walked calmly around the front of the Bugatti and stopped directly in front of Alice. He reached out and, with a gentleness that seemed utterly at odds with his formidable presence, opened the passenger door. "Alice," he said. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the street noise like a scalpel. "Is this resolved?" Alice finally looked up, her expression calm. The trembling in her hands had stopped. "Yes, Mr. Sterling. It is finalized." "Good," he said. He glanced at her simple portfolio. "Did you bring the files on the Rotterdam acquisition?" "They're in my bag, sir," she replied. "Excellent. We have a flight to Geneva. The auction at Sotheby's is tomorrow, and I want to review the provenance on that lost Picasso one more time before we commit." He held the door for her. Alice paused and for the first time turned to look at Mark. She didn't look angry. She didn't look triumphant. She looked indifferent. It was the look one might give a stranger who had bumped into them in a crowd. She gave him a single small nod. "Goodbye, Mark." She slid into the low-slung seat of the Bugatti. Damian Sterling closed the door with a soft, expensive thud. He walked back to the driver's side. Only then, just before getting in, did he finally let his gaze fall on Mark. His eyes were steel gray. He looked at Mark for precisely 1 second. It was not a look of anger. It was a look of complete and total dismissal. It was the look a king might give a court jester who had just told a bad joke. Then he got in the car. The engine, which had been nearly silent, growled to life, a deep thrumming sound of pure power. The car pulled away from the curb and disappeared into traffic, leaving Mark and Chloe standing in its exhaust. Chloe was the first to speak, her voice high and shaky. Mark. Who was that? How does she know? Who was that? Mark was frozen. His face was chalk white. The smirk was gone, replaced by a mask of dawning, sickening horror. That, he stammered, his $5,000 suit suddenly feeling like a cheap rental. That was Damian Sterling. 6 months earlier, Alice had been sleeping on her sister's sofa, surrounded by boxes of what was left of her life. Mark had been brutal. The moment she confronted him about Chloe, he hadn't just been defensive. He'd been offensive. He froze their joint accounts, hired Graves, and had her served with divorce papers before she'd even packed a bag. He claimed irreconcilable differences and financial abandonment, stating she was a drain on his assets. She was broken. The woman who had graduated top of her class in art history and curation from Yale, who had been the most promising junior curator at the Halcyon Gallery in New York before Mark moved them to Houston for his career, was now applying for jobs as a barista. One night, scrolling through obscure high-level job boards, she found a posting. It was anonymous, posted by a private recruitment firm. Wanted private collection manager and asset curator. Must have expert knowledge in 17th century Dutch masters, postmodern sculpture, and identification of high-level forgeries. Must be willing to travel internationally 80% of the time. Must be able to pass an exhaustive background check and sign a lifetime non-disclosure agreement. Discretion is paramount. Is salary. Non-negotiable and substantial. It was a fantasy. A job for someone with decades of experience. Alice, on a whim fueled by desperation and a glass of cheap wine, sent in her old resume along with a scathing but brilliant analysis she'd written on a recently discovered Vermeer that she was certain was a fake. She didn't expect a reply. She got one 2 hours later. An email. Be at this address tomorrow, 9 a.m. Bring your passport. The address was a nondescript glass tower downtown. The elevator required a key card which a silent guard provided. She was led into a penthouse office that was empty save for a desk, 2 chairs, and a single painting on the wall. Damian Sterling was standing in front of it. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't shake her hand. He just pointed at the painting, a chaotic, beautiful piece in the style of Jackson Pollock. I paid $22 million for this at a private auction last year, he said, his voice as quiet as it had been on the courthouse steps. It was authenticated by the artist's estate. Tell me about it. Alice looked. She really looked. She walked closer, examining the canvas, the paint spatter, the signature. For 10 minutes, the only sound was the hum of the air conditioning. It's beautiful, she said finally. I didn't ask if it was beautiful, Sterling replied, his back still to her. It's a forgery, Alice said. He turned. His eyes narrowed. Explain. The Pollock method is about controlled chaos. This is just chaos. The drip patterns are wrong. They're too hesitant in places, too aggressive in others. But the real proof, she pointed to a tiny corner, is the paint. That's titanium white. But it's an acrylic-based titanium, not the oil-based casing he used during this period. This was painted probably in the 1980s, not 1950. Sterling stared at her. His face was unreadable. He walked to his desk and pressed a button on his intercom. Send in Mr. Vance. A moment later, a flustered-looking man in an expensive suit rushed in. Sir, Mr. Vance, this is Ms. Hayes. She has just identified the Pollock as a fake. Mr. Vance laughed nervously. Sir, with all due respect, my team at Sotheby's authenticated that. It's impossible. Ms. Hayes, Sterling interrupted. What did you say about the paint? It's acrylic-based titanium white, Alice said, her voice steady. His was casein. You can run a simple mass spectrometry on it. I'll stake my reputation on it." "Vance," Sterling said, "have the lab do it. Now, if she's right, you're fired." Mr. Vance went pale and scrambled out of the room. Sterling turned back to Alice. "You're divorced?" he asked. Alice flinched. "It's in process." "Your husband is Mark Anderson at Goldman Sachs," Sterling stated. It wasn't a question. "He's a portfolio manager, over-leveraged in his personal life and thinks he's smarter than he is. He's cheating on you with his paralegal." Alice was speechless. How did you know that?" "I don't tolerate fools, Miss Hayes. And I don't hire people I haven't thoroughly investigated. The background check was comprehensive." He tapped his desk. "Your analysis of the fake Vermeer was correct. My team came to the same conclusion last week. It took them 3 months. It took you 1 night." He walked to the window. "I own the largest private art collection in the world. It's a liability. It's an asset. And it's full of snakes like Vance telling me what I want to hear. I need someone who tells me the truth, even if it costs me $22 million. He turned. "You start today. The job pays $1 million a year plus expenses. You will answer only to me. Your first task is to go through my entire collection piece by piece and find every other mistake Mr. Vance made. My car is waiting downstairs to take you to your new apartment. Sign the NDA on the desk." That was 4 months ago. 4 months of 18-hour days flights to Zurich, Tokyo, and Paris. 4 months of rediscovering the razor-sharp intellect she had buried to make Mark comfortable. She wasn't his mistress. She was his most valuable and most trusted asset manager. The $50,000 settlement wasn't a lifeline. It was an insult, and Mr. Sterling, who despised being insulted almost as much as he despised being lied to, had insisted on picking her up from the courthouse himself. Mark didn't go to Uchi. He didn't go back to the office. He went to the River Oaks condo, his condo, and poured a glass of Macallan 25. He drank it in one go. "Mark, you're scaring me," Chloe said, pacing the marble floor. "Who was she with? You said she was broke. You said she was nothing." "He's a client," Mark mumbled, pouring another. "He's not just a client. He's the client. Sterling Industries has half their liquid assets managed by our Houston office. He's Damian Sterling. The billionaire, the one who owns that island." Chloe's eyes went wide, but not with fear, with calculation. "So, she's his girlfriend. She left you for a billionaire?" "No!" Mark shouted, slamming the glass down. "She didn't leave me. I left her. She got lucky. She must have, I don't know, met him at a bar. She's a gold digger. That's all this is." But his words sounded hollow even to him. The Alice who stepped into that car wasn't the mousy, apologetic woman he'd kicked out. She was cold, she was confident, and she was working. Geneva, Sotheby's, the Rotterdam acquisition. He stormed into his home office and booted up his computer. He pulled up the internal Goldman database. He searched for Sterling Damian. His file was practically empty. Client level Zeus, eyes only, managed by DC office executive. He was locked out. He, a senior vice president, was locked out of a client's file. He spent the next week in a fog of pure acidic obsession. He couldn't work. He couldn't sleep. Every time he looked at Chloe, he saw her $10,000 Birkin bag and compared it to the casual way Damian Sterling had stepped out of a $3 million car. His entire world was built on the hierarchy of wealth. He was a success because he had the condo, the car, the beautiful woman. He had won the divorce. But in 1 second on a courthouse step, Damian Sterling had rendered his entire life a pathetic joke. Alice hadn't just traded up. She had ascended to a level he couldn't even comprehend. He started digging. He used his connections to find out about Alice's new life. "She's not his girlfriend. A contact at a rival firm told him over drinks after Mark pried him with expensive whiskey. I've heard rumors. Sterling hired some unknown woman to run his private collection. They call her the Nun. She's brutal. She's been cleaning house, fired half his European staff, discovered 3 high-level forgeries, saved him over $100 million in the last quarter alone. They say she answers to no one but the ghost himself. Mark felt sick. She saved $100 million, his Alice. The woman he'd told was too simple to understand his work. The humiliation was a physical ache. It wasn't just that she was successful. It was that her success was in the one field she had given up for him. He hadn't just divorced her. He had underestimated her. And in his world, underestimation was a fatal sin. Chloe wasn't helping. So she's working for him like an assistant. Why do you even care, Mark? We're rich. We're happy. He's not rich, Chloe. He's wealthy, Mark snapped. You don't understand the difference. What I understand is that you're obsessed with your ex-wife, she shrieked. It's pathetic. The cracks in their perfect relationship were already showing. Chloe was a trophy, but trophies are heavy, and they require constant polishing. Mark was too distracted to provide it. He did something stupid. He found her apartment the one Sterling Industries was leasing for her. A penthouse at the Post Oak, the most exclusive building in the city. He waited in the lobby. When she walked in, flanked by 2 security guards, he stepped out from behind a pillar. Alice. She didn't flinch. Her security tensed, but she held up a hand. Mark, you're trespassing. I wanted to talk. He looked pathetic, and he knew it. Listen, Al. That man, Sterling, he's dangerous. You don't know the things I know. These men, they're users. You're in over your head. He was trying to sound concerned, but it came out as a desperate plea. Alice adjusted the strap of her bag. I'm in over my head, Mark. I'm late for a call with the curator of the Rijksmuseum. You are... What exactly? A mid-level manager worried about his bonus. You're right. I am in over my head. The water's just fine up here. You? You bitch, he spat. You think you're better than me? I don't think anything, Mark, she said, her voice devoid of all emotion. I'm just busy. Go home. Enjoy the condo. You earned it, remember? She walked past him. Her security guards, both men built like refrigerators, stared him down until the elevator doors closed. Mark was left alone in the opulent lobby, shaking with a rage so profound it choked him. In Geneva, Alice was in her element. The Sotheby's auction was a symphony of quiet wealth, and she was the conductor. She sat in a private skybox with Damien Sterling advising him. The Picasso is legitimate, she whispered, looking at the data on her tablet. Provenance is solid, but the Monet... The one in lot 34, it's a pass. My team in Paris loves it, Sterling murmured, not taking his eyes off the auctioneer. Your team in Paris is wrong. The brushwork on the water lilies is too precise. Monet's eyesight was failing by 1921. He was painting from memory and emotion. This was painted by someone with perfect vision trying to copy emotion. It's a studio piece, not a masterwork. Not worth the $30 million estimate. Sterling nodded. Pass on lot 34. Later that evening, in the penthouse suite of the Four Seasons, Sterling reviewed her work. You saved me $30 million on the Monet. You made me $50 million on the Rotterdam acquisition by proving our Rembrandt was the original and theirs was the copy. You've made my collection $80 million more valuable in 1 week. He poured 2 glasses of water. He didn't drink alcohol. The settlement from your husband? He said, handing her a glass. $50,000. It's an insulting figure. It's over, Mr. Sterling. I'm just glad to be done with it. We're not done, he said. He insulted you. By extension, he insulted my judgment. I had my legal team, my real legal team, not the divorce attorneys, look into Mr. Anderson's financials. Alice tensed. Sir. He declared his net worth at $4.5 million. Sterling said, pulling up a file on his laptop. His condo, his stock portfolio, his bonuses. It was all there. But it felt light. A man with his spending habits. That Birkin bag for his mistress. The new BMW. The condo. He was leveraged to the hilt, but he was also spending cash. Lots of it. Sterling turned the laptop to face her. My forensic accountants found something. A series of shell corporations based in the Cayman Islands. Small regular transfers. A few thousand here, a few thousand there. Over 5 years it adds up. Alice looked at the screen. Her blood ran cold. She recognized the account numbers. Mark was a gambler, she said softly. Not just at work. He had a private poker game, high stakes. He told me it was just blowing off steam with the guys. But he was always so secretive about it. This isn't poker, Alice, Sterling said. This is embezzlement. He's been skimming, taking small percentages off client management fees and diverting them. It's sophisticated, but it's theft. Alice stared at the numbers. She had seen this. She'd found a ledger once hidden in his study. She'd confronted him and he'd told her it was a creative accounting strategy for his taxes and not to worry her pretty little head about it. She'd been so beaten down, so desperate to believe him that she'd let it go. I have the original ledger, she whispered. When I moved out, I took a box of what I thought were my old journals. It's in there. I wanted to be free of him. I didn't want to fight anymore. A rare cold smile touched Damien Sterling's lips. Freedom is one thing, justice is another. He built his kingdom by stealing from his clients and underestimating his wife. Both are unforgivable. He closed the laptop. Send the ledger to my legal team. They'll know what to do. Mark Anderson was on top of the world, or so he told himself. He'd managed to put the Alice Sterling situation out of his mind mostly by pouring himself into his work. He was desperate to land a new massive client. He needed a win to shore up his ego. He was in his glass-walled office berating a junior analyst when his boss, the regional director, appeared at his door. He was flanked by 2 men Mark didn't recognize. They wore dark, boring suits and had the grim expressions of undertakers. Mark, his boss said, his voice strained. These gentlemen are from the SEC. They need to speak with you. Mark's cocky smile vanished. SEC, what is this? Some client complaint? We're not here to talk, Mr. Anderson, the first agent said. We're here for your files, all of them. You can't just, Mark started. We can, the second agent said, holding up a warrant. Your terminal is frozen. You'll be escorted to conference room A. The walk was the longest of Mark's life. The entire trade floor went silent watching him. This was the perp walk, the walk of shame for a finance bro. In conference room A, it got worse. His lawyer Graves was already there looking pale, and at the head of the table sat a woman he didn't recognize, her hair in a severe bun with a laptop open. Mr. Anderson, the SEC agent said, we have evidence of a 5-year pattern of wire fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. What? That's insane, Mark blustered. I'm one of the top earners in this office. The woman at the laptop spoke. Mr. Anderson, my name is Maria Jenkins. I'm the head of forensic accounting for Sterling Industries. For the past 4 weeks, at the request of Mr. Sterling, we have been conducting a private audit of all accounts managed by this office. We found irregularities. We passed those irregularities to the SEC. Mark's blood drained from his face. Sterling. It was Sterling. This is because of my ex-wife, Mark yelled, pointing at Graves. She put him up to this. It's divorce retaliation. This is the ledger you kept in your home study, correct? Ms. Jenkins said, sliding a book across the table. Mark looked at it. It was his. The one Alice had found. The one he thought was long gone. And these, she continued, are the corresponding transfers from Goldman Sachs client accounts into shell corporations in the Cayman Islands. The accounts. They're all in your name. You've stolen an estimated $8.4 million over 5 years. Mark was silent. He was done. "Mr. Anderson," the SEC agent said, standing up, "you're under arrest." It was a blur. They cuffed him. They read him his rights. As they led him through the lobby of the Goldman Sachs Tower, he saw that everyone was watching. His colleagues, his rivals. And then he saw Chloe. She was standing by the security desk, her Birkin bag on the floor. She wasn't crying. She was talking to another executive, a man Mark knew was his direct competitor. She looked at Mark, saw the cuffs, and turned her back. She laughed at something the other man said and walked with him toward the elevators. The trophy had just jumped to a new shelf. As the agents pushed him through the revolving doors, Mark looked out onto the street. And in that moment, in a flash of perfect cruel irony, he saw her, Alice. She wasn't there for him. She was just walking by, holding a cup of coffee, heading into the building next door, the Sterling Industries building. She happened to look over as the agents guided him into the back of an unmarked black car. Their eyes met through the glass. Mark expected to see triumph. He expected to see a smirk. He expected the same mockery he had shown her. He saw none of it. Alice just looked at him, her expression unreadable, and then a flicker of pity. It was the same look she'd given him on the courthouse steps, indifference tinged with a faint sadness. She turned her shoulders straight and walked into her building. That one look broke him more than the handcuffs. The realization that he wasn't even worth her anger. He was just a problem that had been resolved. 1 year had passed. The name Mark Anderson was a ghost. A cautionary tale whispered in the high-stakes bars of downtown Houston and on the trading floors of Wall Street. He was a story about the man who had it all and lost it, a fool who thought he was a king. After a humiliating 6-month trial where his entire life of petty thefts, lies, and emotional abuse was laid bare, he'd pleaded guilty to 8 counts of wire fraud and embezzlement. He was currently serving a 7-year sentence in a federal low-security prison. He had lost the condo, his reputation, his car, and his freedom. He was by every metric he had ever valued a complete and total failure. The name Alice Hayes, however, was becoming a legend. Tonight was the coronation. The Metropolitan Museum of Art was a fortress of light against the cool Manhattan night. The unveiling of the Sterling Wing was the single most anticipated cultural event of the decade. It wasn't just a new wing. It was a tectonic shift in the art world. Damian Sterling, the ghost of Wall Street, had finally decided to show his cards, and he had chosen Alice Hayes to be his dealer. Alice stood just inside the arched entryway, a masterpiece of glass and light that bridged the old neoclassical building with the hyper-modern new wing. The wing itself was her design. Her vision, a 3-story atrium of white Italian marble and brushed steel designed to feel less like a museum and more like a cathedral. And tonight it was full. The air hummed with the sound of quiet generational wealth. Billionaires mingled with Pulitzer Prize-winning artists. Politicians kissed the hands of European royalty. The scent of orchids and expensive champagne hung in the air. Alice herself was almost unrecognizable from the woman on the courthouse steps. She wore a simple floor-length gown of midnight blue silk. It was understated elegant and had cost more than Mark's BMW. Her hair, which she used to pull back in a severe apologetic bun, was styled in soft, confident waves. She wore no jewelry save for a pair of teardrop sapphire earrings that Sterling had given her, a signing bonus, he'd called them, after her first month. She was not the mousy, trembling woman he had mocked. She was the Sterling Eye, a name coined by a fawning Vanity Fair profile, a title she had initially hated but now accepted. She was the head curator and president of the Sterling Art Foundation, a $10 billion philanthropic endowment. Her job was no longer just to acquire art, but to preserve it, study it, and share it. She was in this world terrifyingly powerful, and she was at this moment terrified. This was her debut. For the last 18 months she had been a phantom operating in the shadows just like her boss. She'd been in dusty archives in Florence, in high-tech verification labs in Zurich, and intense private auctions in Hong Kong. She had worked 18-hour days 7 days a week, fueled by a ferocious, burning need to prove her own worth to the only person who mattered anymore, herself. Tonight she was stepping into the light. "It is adequate." The voice, quiet as a tomb, came from beside her. Damian Sterling had materialized from the crowd. He was dressed in his uniform, a perfect dark charcoal suit. He didn't look at the crowd. He was looking at the centerpiece of the atrium, the lost Rembrandt they had acquired from the Rotterdam deal, now lit to perfection. "Just adequate, Mr. Sterling?" Alice asked, a small smile playing on her lips. "The lighting on the left hand is half a degree off," he murmured. "It's hitting the signet ring, but it's missing the texture of the cuff. See to it." "I'll have it fixed," Alice said, making a mental note. "Good." He finally turned his steel-gray eyes to her. "The Board of Trustees is ecstatic. The Times is calling it a triumph of New World philanthropy. You've done well, Ms. Hayes." From Damian Sterling, "You've done well" was the equivalent of a marching band and a ticker-tape parade. "Thank you, sir," she said. "Do not thank me. You executed the strategy." He nodded toward the crowd. "Now go. This is your evening. Mingle with the vipers. I'll be observing." He stepped back into an unlit alcove, a ghost at his own party, and simply watched. Alice took a deep breath and stepped into the main hall. She was immediately swarmed. Donors, critics, artists, all wanting a piece of the Sterling eye. She handled them with a grace she hadn't known she possessed, discussing 17th century pigment composition with one and endowment strategy with another. She was fluent, confident, and precise. Then she saw her. Across the room, standing beside a much older, much paunchier man with a politician's smile, was Chloe. She was poured into a glittering, garish gold dress, her blonde hair piled high. She was still beautiful, and she was still holding a Birkin bag, a new one in bright crocodile pink. She had landed on her feet just as Alice knew she would. Chloe was a survivor, a trophy that knew her own value on the market. Their eyes met across the room. Alice saw a flash of emotions on Chloe's face. First confusion. "Who is that?" Then dawning recognition, followed by a wave of pure, unadulterated shock. Chloe's painted-on smile faltered. She saw Alice's dress, her poise, the wing of a museum that was essentially her project. Chloe looked down at her own garish dress, at the aging man whose arm she was holding, and for a single beautiful second she looked cheap. Alice didn't smirk. She didn't glare. She didn't give her the satisfaction of any emotion at all. She simply held her gaze, gave a small, polite, and utterly dismissive nod, and turned back to the museum director she was speaking to. It was a small victory, but it was sweet. She was so focused on this small triumph that she didn't see the real threat until he was right in front of her. "Ms. Hayes, a pleasure." His name was Julian Thorne. He was the chief curator of the MoMA, a man from old money with a patrician accent and a deep-seated contempt for anyone who hadn't inherited their position. He saw the art world as his exclusive club, and she was the nouveau riche upstart with a billionaire's checkbook crashing the gates. In his eyes, she wasn't a curator. She was a glorified personal shopper. He was Mark Anderson, but with a Ph.D. from Cambridge. "Mr. Thorne," Alice said, her voice cool, "I'm so glad you could make it. I hope you're enjoying the exhibit." Thorne, flanked by a small parasitic entourage of critics and reporters, smiled a thin, condescending smile. "It is certainly an exhibit," he said, letting the word hang. "So much volume. Mr. Sterling has certainly been a busy bee. One wonders if there was any actual strategy behind the acquisitions, or if it was simply a matter of, 'I'll take one of those and one of those.'" The reporter scribbled. This was blood in the water. "The strategy," Alice said, her voice perfectly even, "is truth. We acquire pieces that have been lost, forgotten, or misattributed. We use Mr. Sterling's resources to restore them and give them back to the public. Like the Donatello in the South Gallery, the one your own museum declared a 19th century imitation." Thorne's face tightened. She had just very publicly reminded him that she had bought a piece he rejected, which her team had since authenticated, making it one of the most valuable sculptures in the world. "A lucky guess, my dear," Thorne sneered. "A blind squirrel finds a nut and all that. But luck runs out." He turned and pointed his long, pale finger aimed at the centerpiece, the Rembrandt. "This piece, for instance," he said, his voice rising, projecting to the crowd. "The lost Rembrandt. A bold claim. My colleagues at the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam are deeply skeptical. They've had their own version, the Rotterdam Rembrandt, for 50 years. They believe it is the original." He stepped closer to her, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, venomous whisper. "They believe, Mr. Sterling, and by extension you simply bought the provenance, paid off a few experts to create a paper trail. A costly, embarrassing mistake. You've built your entire wing around a fake Ms. Hayes, and tomorrow the Times is running a front-page story on that very skepticism." This was it. The ambush. The crowd went silent. The reporters' pens were flying. This wasn't just a challenge. It was an execution. He was accusing her in front of the entire art world of being a fraud. He was trying to do to her exactly what Mark had done, mock her, dismiss her, and paint her as a stupid, unqualified woman who was in over her head. She looked past Thorne's smug face across the vast atrium and saw Damian Sterling in the shadows. He was watching. He made no move to help. This was her test. Alice turned her back to Thorne and looked at the painting. She looked at it for a long, silent 10 seconds. She let the tension build. The only sound was the distant click of a camera. When she turned back, she was no longer nervous. She was a different person. She was the Sterling Eye. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice clear and cutting. "You're right to be skeptical. I was too." She walked toward the painting and the crowd parted for her. Thorne had no choice but to follow. She stopped directly in front of it. "You and your colleagues in Amsterdam are correct," she said. "The Rotterdam piece is brilliant. The brushwork is exquisite. The composition is identical. For 50 years it has been without question considered the original." Thorne smiled. "So you admit it. But it's a copy." Alice interrupted, her voice like steel. "A masterful contemporary copy painted by a student in his studio. And do you know how we know?" Thorne was silent. Alice pointed to the painted cuff on the subject's left wrist. "We know because of this. You've seen the painting, Mr. Thorne, but you haven't studied it. My team and I spent 4 months on this piece. We ran mass spectrometry, X-ray fluorescence, and infrared reflectography. The Rotterdam piece is painted on a standard oak panel, which is correct for the period." She tapped the wall label next to the painting. "This one, however, is painted on a panel of mahogany imported from the New World, a wood that Rembrandt was known to favor for his most important commissions, but which his students could almost never afford. But that's not the proof. That's just a hint." She looked directly at the New York Times reporter. "The proof is in the mistakes." She motioned for a museum attendant who handed her a tablet. She tapped the screen and a large monitor on the wall lit up, showing an infrared image of the painting. "This," Alice said, "is the pentimento, the underdrawing, the artist's original sketch which he painted over. Look at the subject's right hand. In the underdrawing he was holding a pair of gloves. In the final painting the gloves are gone and his hand is resting on the hilt of his sword." She zoomed in, her voice resonating with absolute, unshakable authority. "A forger, Mr. Thorne, copies the final product. They copy what they see. The Rotterdam painting. It has no pentimento. It was painted perfectly all at once. It's a brilliant copy of this, our final version." She turned to face the stunned crowd. "Only the master changes his mind. The Rotterdam piece is a copy. This is the original. This is the process. This is the truth." She then delivered the final devastating blow. She looked back at Thorne, her expression not triumphant, but almost pitying, the same look she had given Mark as he was forced into the police car. "My full analysis, including the spectral data and the IR scans, was sent to the Rijksmuseum 2 days ago. We received their official retraction of their original claim this morning. They will be co-authoring our paper on the discovery." She looked at the Times reporter. I believe their official statement is being released to your editor right about now. You may want to check your email. Your front page story is going to need a new headline. Julian Thorne's face was chalk white. He had been so sure. He had been so arrogant. He had been academically, forensically, and publicly gutted. He didn't say a word. He just turned his entourage melting away from him and walked humiliated out of the wing. The silence that followed lasted 3 seconds. Then it broke. The room erupted in thunderous, sustained applause. It wasn't just polite. It was a roar. Alice stood by the Rembrandt, her hand resting lightly on the wall label. She had done it. She hadn't yelled. She hadn't cried. She had used her mind. She had used the knowledge they'd told her was useless. She had won. Later, after the applause had finally died down, she walked to the podium to give her official remarks. Her earlier nerves were gone. She owned this room. She owned her life. Art, she said, her voice clear and strong, is not about possession. It's not about an asset on a balance sheet or a trophy for a wall. It is about preservation. It's about a conversation across centuries. It's about finding the truth in the canvas even when that truth has been painted over. She smiled a small, genuine smile that lit up her face. For too long, this world has been dominated by those who see art as just another way to prove their power. Tonight, we change that. The Sterling Wing is open not as a monument to wealth, but as a commitment to the truth, to the stories that were almost lost. The applause was, if possible, even louder. As the party began to wind down, the young, eager reporter from the New York Times, the one who had just gotten the biggest story of her career, found Alice by the window. "Ms. Hayes, that was incredible. An incredible achievement. You've come out of nowhere in the last 18 months. You've completely reshaped the auction world. What's your secret?" Alice took a sip of champagne, looking out over the lights of New York. She thought back to the courthouse, to the smell of stale coffee, to the feel of Mark's dismissive gaze, to the moment she thought her life was over, that she was worthless. "There's no secret," Alice said, her voice warm. "I just stopped letting other people define my worth. It turns out my pretty little head had a lot more in it than anyone, including myself, realized." The reporter scribbled furiously. Across the room, standing alone by a 17th-century Vermeer, was Damien Sterling. He was, as always, observing. He watched Alice hold the room not with threats or volume, but with quiet, unshakable competence. He caught her eye. He didn't smile. A smile was too much. But he gave her a single slow nod. The highest possible praise from the ghost of Wall Street. It was not a nod from a boss to an employee. It was not a nod from a man to a woman he had saved. It was a nod of respect, from one master to another. And that's the story of Alice Hayes. She learned that the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building a life so magnificent that your past becomes completely irrelevant. Mark tried to break her, but he only succeeded in removing himself as the single biggest obstacle to her success. She didn't need a billionaire to save her. She just needed an opportunity to save herself. What did you think of Alice's transformation? Was Mark's downfall just, or was it a cold, calculated move by Sterling? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice and vindication, please show your support by hitting that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own worth. Most importantly, if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel and ring that bell. We post new stories every single week, and you don't want to miss what happens next. Thanks for listening.
The music on the $40 million yacht. The Serenity was loud, but the sudden thump of a police launch slamming against its hull cut through everything. Arthur Vance, Millionaire CEO, shielded his eyes as blue and red lights strafed his guests. He was about to yell at the intrusion when a voice cold as the ocean spray came from the police boat. "Arthur." He froze. It wasn't the police. It was his wife, Eleanor, and she wasn't alone. She was flanked by 2 armed officers and a man holding a thick binder. The party was over. His life was over. And she had planned it all. Eleanor Vance watched the yacht from the panoramic 30th floor window of the law office. The Serenity. It was an absurd, ironic name for the vessel that had become the flagship of her husband's betrayal. From this high up, the Newport Beach harbor was a tapestry of glittering lights, and Arthur's party was the most obnoxious jewel in the display. She could hear the faint thumping of the bass, a heartbeat of disrespect, even through the thick glass. "They're all there," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. Marcus Thorne, her lawyer, clicked off his pen. The board members he bribed the investors for the Shell Corp and her. "Isabella," Eleanor said. The name tasted like ash. Isabella Rossi. The 25-year-old influencer who was at this very moment playing hostess on the yacht Eleanor's money had paid for. "Are you certain you want to do this, Ellie?" Marcus asked. He was the only person alive who still called her that. He had been her father's lawyer, the man who had helped build Vance Global Logistics from a single freighter into a billion-dollar empire. He was family. Eleanor turned from the window. The woman reflected in the glass was not the fragile socialite Arthur described to his friends. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. Her simple black dress was a uniform of mourning, not for her marriage, but for her own naivety. "He thinks I'm at a spa in Ojai," Eleanor said. "He thinks I'm getting a facial and crying into a $500 a night pillow. He thinks I'm stupid." "He's a fool," Marcus said, tapping the thick binder on his desk. "But he was a thorough fool. The forensic accounting report from Mr. Chen. It's breathtaking. He's been siphoning money for 18 months. He set up Rossi Holdings in the Cayman Islands, using her name, and has been awarding it consulting contracts for millions. The party tonight isn't just a party, Eleanor. It's his exit." Eleanor nodded. "The final transfer. He's moving the last $20 million to liquidate the account and flee the country. He thinks he's celebrating a new deal. In reality, he's celebrating his own escape." The memory of her discovery 3 weeks ago was still sharp, a physical wound. It wasn't a lipstick-stained collar or a suspicious text. It was colder. It was an email left open on his study computer by mistake. An email to a private banker in Switzerland detailing the final liquidation of assets. The email chain included Bella Rossi, who had asked, "Does she know yet I'm tired of hiding?" Arthur's reply had sealed his fate. "She doesn't know anything. She's too busy with her charities. By the time she notices we'll be in Dubai, and her name won't even be on the company she thinks she owns. Stop worrying. She thinks she owns." That was the line, the arrogance, the pure distilled contempt for her, the woman whose inheritance he was stealing. Her father, James Vance, had made her the 51% majority shareholder on his deathbed. Arthur was the CEO, the public face, but Eleanor was the owner, and he had forgotten it. "Detective Karras is on standby," Marcus said, interrupting her thoughts. "The Coast Guard is with her. They have the warrant. Once Mr. Chen confirms the final wire transfer has been initiated, we move. Are you sure you want to be there?" Eleanor picked up her purse. "I'm not going to hide in a lawyer's office while he gives my father's company to that child. I want him to see my face when his world ends. I want him to know it was me." She walked to the door, all ice and steel. "Let's go, Marcus. It's time to crash the party." On the 150-foot deck of the Serenity, Arthur Vance was in every sense the king, At 45, he was distractingly handsome, with a thick head of silver-streaked hair and a smile that had disarmed boardrooms and bedrooms for 2 decades. He wore a linen suit, no tie, and a Patek Philippe Nautilus on his wrist, the one Eleanor had given him for their 10th anniversary. "To the future," he boomed, raising a glass of Dom Perignon. His audience, a mix of fawning investors and Newport socialites, cheered back. At his side, Isabella Bella Rossi was a vision in a blood-red Gucci gown. She was draped over him, her hand possessively on his chest. She was everything Eleanor wasn't: young, loud, and spectacularly unsubtle. "Arthur, darling, Mr. Harrison was just asking when the Laguna estate will be refreshed." Bella said, her voice a calculated purr. "I told him the minimalist look is so cold. I'm thinking more Versace." Arthur chuckled and kissed her temple. "Whatever my queen wants." The implication was clear to everyone. The old queen was out. The new one was already measuring for curtains. A venture capitalist named Ben Harrington clapped Arthur on the back. "Big moves tonight, Arthur. Big moves. This new international logistics partnership is a game changer. You're a genius." "You just have to know when to strike, Ben," Arthur said, his eyes glittering. "When to cut dead weight and streamline for the future. Vance Global is about to be lighter, faster, and more profitable than ever." Dead weight, he'd called Eleanor to her face last week. She had confronted him not about the money, but about the affair. She had wanted to give him one last chance to come clean, to salvage something. "Eleanor, don't be hysterical," he'd scoffed, adjusting his tie in their cavernous walk-in closet. "Bella is just an intern. You're being paranoid. Honestly, this obsession is unattractive. You should focus on your gardening or whatever it is you do. Leave the business to me." He had gaslit her, patting her on the head as if she were a distressed poodle. It was that moment, that condescending pat, that had erased any lingering doubt about what she had to do. Now on the yacht, Bella was holding court. "I just don't understand how she could let herself go," Bella was saying to a small, rapt circle of women. "A man like Arthur, he has needs. He needs a partner, not a museum piece." "What about his wife?" one of the women asked, a rare flicker of decency in her eyes. "Eleanor is such a lovely woman." Bella waved a dismissive hand. Her diamond bracelets, paid for by Vance Global's consulting fees, catching the light. "Oh, Ellie, she's fragile. Always has been. The pressure of the company was just too much for her. Arthur had to step in and save it. He's saving her, really. She'll be much happier in a quiet, simple life. Once the divorce is final, of course." Arthur, overhearing this, beamed with pride. He loved this. The public adoration, the beautiful woman on his arm, the secret of the $20 million that was at that very second sliding from his company's main account into his offshore haven. He slipped away from the party and went down to his private study in the stateroom. He opened his laptop. The banking portal was open. Transaction status pending. He sipped his champagne. This was the last piece. The transfer was set to execute at 9:00 p.m. It was 8:58. He watched the screen. Transaction status processing. A small bead of sweat trickled down his temple. This was the big one. The one that would be noticed. But by the time the alarms went off on Monday morning, he and Bella would be on a private jet to a country with no extradition treaty. Transaction status complete. A wide, predatory grin split Arthur's face. He closed the laptop. He had done it. He had actually done it. He was free. He was rich. And he had won. He walked back onto the deck, grabbing Bella and pulling her into a deep theatrical kiss as the crowd cheered. "It's done," he whispered in her ear. "Everything is ours." "I knew you'd handle it, my king," she purred. It was then, at the absolute peak of his triumph, that the first blue light hit his face. The music cut out, and a new boat, grey and menacing, slammed into the side of his pristine white yacht. The discovery hadn't been a single moment. It was a slow, sickening unravelling. It began 6 months ago. Eleanor, as majority shareholder, still received the top-level quarterly financials. It was a formality. Arthur always walked her through them, his voice a lulling drone of market fluctuations and aggressive expansion, his finger pointing to the healthy bottom line. She had always trusted him. Her father had trusted him. But this time, a name stood out in the exceptional vendor payments addendum. Rossi Holdings, LLC, $1.5 million. "Who is Rossi Holdings?" she had asked over dinner at their Laguna Beach home, the ocean crashing below them. Arthur didn't even look up from his steak. "Logistics Consulting, a new firm out of Panama. They're streamlining our South American routes. It's boring, technical stuff. Don't worry your head about it." "Rossi," Eleanor had mused. "Like that new intern you hired, Isabella Rossi." Arthur's fork had clattered against his plate. Just for a second, his eyes, when they met hers, were cold. "Don't be ridiculous, Eleanor. It's a common name. Are you implying something?" "No, of course not," she had said, forcing a smile. But the seed was planted. That night, she went into her father's old study. She ran a simple corporate search. Rossi Holdings, LLC, was registered in the Cayman Islands, not Panama. And its date of incorporation was just 1 day after Bella Rossi had been hired as Arthur's personal assistant. It was a thread. She pulled it. She called Mr. Chen a forensic accountant her father had used for decades. "I need you to be discreet, David," she'd said. "I'm worried about some irregularities." For 2 weeks she lived a lie. She attended charity luncheons. She hosted a garden party. She smiled and kissed her husband, all while Mr. Chen was digging tunneling into the digital foundations of Vance Global. The call came on a Tuesday. "You need to come to my office, Mrs. Vance, and you need to come alone." Mr. Chen's office was a sterile box of white and grey, filled with file servers. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He put a single sheet of paper on the desk. It was a wire transfer confirmation. "This is the first one," he said. 18 months ago, $250,000, coded as software upgrade. It went to Rossi Holdings. This is the second. $500,000. Port leasing fees. This is the third. Fuel surcharge. Docking arbitration. Contingency fees. It's a new one every month. He's been bleeding the company dry, Mrs. Vance. Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. How much? As of this morning, Mr. Chen said $37 million. She had to grip the chair to stay upright. It wasn't just an affair. The affair was a symptom. The disease was this. He was systematically gutting her father's legacy. But the board, the CFO. How could no one notice? He's been faking the receivables, Chen explained, pointing to a complex flowchart. He's creating phantom clients, logging their payments to cover the holes, then writing off the losses as bad debt 6 months later. It's sophisticated, but the money he's stealing, it's all going to one place, an account in Bella Rossi's name. That was when the other file had appeared. Mr. Chen slid a slim manila folder across the desk. This is the other part of it. I'm so sorry, Eleanor. Inside were photographs, Arthur and Bella. In Paris at a hotel she and Arthur had stayed at for their anniversary. Arthur and Bella on a beach in St. Bart's. Arthur and Bella kissing walking out of a jewelry store in Beverly Hills, her hand on her stomach. Her hand on her stomach. Eleanor's breath hitched. "Is she—" "We believe she is pregnant, yes," Mr. Chen said gently. "The final piece of the puzzle, I'm afraid, is the Vance International Partnership, the one he's announcing tonight at the party. It's not a partnership, it's a sale. A sale. He's planning to sell the company's entire freight fleet to a competitor disguised as a merger. But the payment isn't going to Vance Global. It's going to him. To a new shell corp, the final $20 million. The party is the cover for him to get the last signatures. Once that wire transfer goes through tonight, he's gone, and the company will be an empty shell." Eleanor sat in silence for a full minute, the evidence of her life's destruction laid out before her. The betrayal was so total, so absolute, it was almost beautiful in its monstrosity. He wasn't just leaving her. He was erasing her. She stood up. The shock had passed, replaced by a cold Arctic rage. "He's not just stealing from me, Mr. Chen. He's stealing from my father. He's stealing from the 5,000 employees at Vance Global. He thinks I'm dead weight. I'm about to become the anchor that drags him to the bottom of the ocean." She picked up her phone. "Get me Marcus Thorne. Tell him it's a code red. And then get me the Newport Beach Police." Marcus Thorne's law firm, Thorne and Associates, occupied the top 3 floors of the most expensive high-rise in Newport. Marcus himself was a lion in his late 60s, with a shock of white hair and a reputation for being ruthless in a courtroom. When Eleanor walked in with Mr. Chen's files, Marcus cancelled his next 3 meetings. He read the report, his expression growing darker with every page. When he finished, he closed the binder, removed his glasses, and looked at Eleanor. "The ungrateful parasite," he whispered. "I told your father. I told him Arthur was too smooth, too ambitious." "I know, Marcus," Eleanor said. "But I told you so won't get my company back. He's moving the last $20 million tonight. We have to stop him." "This is beyond a civil complaint, Ellie," Marcus said, his legal mind already racing. "This isn't just divorce. This is grand larceny. This is wire fraud. This is racketeering. He used company assets to bribe board members. I see the payments here. He forged your signature on the corporate resolution to open the new accounts. So what do? We don't just file for divorce. We send him to prison," Marcus said, his voice hardening. "We need the police, not just any police. We need the Economic Crimes Unit. We need someone who can understand this and who won't be intimidated by the name Vance." He picked up his private line. "Get me Detective Maria Karras." "Yes, I'll hold." He looked at Eleanor. "Karras is a bulldog. She brought down that real estate Ponzi scheme in Irvine last year. She hates rich men who think they're above the law. She's perfect." An hour later, they were in a sterile interrogation room at the Newport Beach Police Department. Detective Karras was not what Eleanor expected. She was young, sharp, and wore a leather jacket and an expression of profound skepticism. "Mrs. Vance. Mr. Thorne. I'm busy. You told my sergeant this was an active multi-million-dollar fraud." "What I'm seeing," she said, flipping through the top pages of the report, "is a very rich woman who's unhappy her husband is cheating on her." "Did you get to page 5, Detective?" Marcus asked calmly. Karras sighed and flipped to page 5. It was the forged signature. And page 7, the wire transfer to Rossi Holdings. Page 12, the Cayman Islands Incorporation papers in Bella Rossi's name. Karras stopped flipping. she read. For 10 solid minutes, she read. The only sound was the buzz of the fluorescent lights. She looked up, her skepticism gone. He's liquidating tonight at the party. At 9:00 p.m., Eleanor confirmed. He's using the party as a cover to get the final signatures from 2 investors who are in on the deal. He's moving $20 million. Then he's gone. Dubai, Karas said, reading a note. No extradition. Smart. He thinks he is, Eleanor said. He thinks I'm a fool. Karas closed the binder. She stood up. Mrs. Vance, what you're alleging, if this is true, this is one of the largest single-day embezzlement cases I've ever seen. But I can't just raid a party on a yacht based on your word. You don't have to, Marcus said. He slid a laptop across the table. Mr. Chen is a white-hat hacker. He has a back door into the company's servers. He's monitoring the accounts in real time. The moment that $20 million transfer is initiated, it's a felony in progress. You'll have your probable cause. Karas stared at the laptop. A plan was forming in her eyes. A boat, huh? In the middle of the harbor. That makes him a flight risk. I can get an emergency warrant from a judge contingent on that transfer, but I'll need a way to stop him from sailing off. I've already called in a favor, Marcus said. The U.S. Coast Guard Newport sector is a very good friend of mine. They're on standby for a vessel inspection at my signal. They'll be our muscle. You'll be the law. Karas nodded, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her face. Okay. I'm in. But you, Mrs. Vance, you stay here. This is a police operation. No, Eleanor said, standing up. I'm not. This isn't just a criminal. That is my husband. He is stealing my father's life's work. I will be on that boat. I will be there when you cuff him. He needs to see me. He needs to know I'm the one who took him down. Or there's no deal. Karas studied her for a long moment. The fragile socialite was gone. In her place was a woman Karas understood. A woman bent on justice. Fine, Karas said, grabbing her radio. But you do exactly as I say. Get your lawyer friend, Mr. Thorne. We have a party to crash. The party on the Serenity was reaching its crescendo. The champagne was flowing so freely that the deck was sticky. Arthur Vance, having secured his financial freedom, was now indulging in his other appetites. He had Bella pinned against the railing, kissing her deeply, his hand sliding up her red dress as the crowd of socialites and investors hooted and cheered. Get a room, Ben Harrington shouted, laughing. We'll get a plane. Arthur laughed back, pulling Bella close. To hell with rooms, we'll buy an island. Bella giggled, drunk on champagne and power. I want one with a volcano, my king. Whatever you want. He felt invincible. Every single person on this boat he thought either wanted to be him or be with him. They envied his success, his yacht, his beautiful young mistress. They envied his freedom. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, annoyed at the interruption. The screen was dark, but a single notification banner was at the top. It was from his corporate email. Subject urgent, server maintenance. He frowned. He hadn't approved any maintenance. He tapped it. The email was from his IT director, Mr. Vance. We've detected a critical security anomaly on the main server. We're shutting down all external access for a 24-hour diagnostic effective immediately. This includes all offshore banking portals. Arthur's blood ran cold. Shutting down now, he muttered. He looked at his Patek Philippe. 9:02 p.m. The transfer had completed at 9:00 p.m. But what if it had been flagged? What if the anomaly was his $20 million transfer? "Arthur." "What's wrong?" Bella asked, her smile fading. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "It's nothing," he snapped, pushing her away more harshly than he intended. "Just work. I need to make a call." He strode back to the stateroom, shoving a waiter out of his way. He slammed the door and grabbed his laptop, his hands shaking. He tried to log back into the Swiss banking portal. Access denied, account locked, pending security verification. No. He frantically dialed his private banker in Geneva. It went straight to a European voicemail. It was the middle of the night there. He tried his IT director. The phone rang once, then went to voicemail. He tried his CFO, the one he'd bribed. Voicemail. A primal animal panic started to rise in his chest. Had he been too arrogant? Had he tripped an automated alarm, or a darker thought? Eleanor. Her silence all day. He'd assumed she was crying at a spa. But what if her silence wasn't weakness? What if it was strategy? "She's not smart enough," he said aloud, trying to convince himself. "She's a gardener, a socialite. She doesn't have the first clue." But the image of her face, calm and cold, flashed in his mind. The way she'd asked about Rossi Holdings. He'd dismissed it as jealousy. What if it had been an investigation? He burst out of the stateroom, his face a mask of panic. He needed to get off this boat. He needed to get to his office. He needed to find out what was happening. "Bella," he shouted, "we're leaving. Now." "What?" "But the party." "Now!" he roared, grabbing her arm. "Arthur, stop, you're hurting me." He didn't care. He was dragging her toward the gangplank, where the valets were waiting when the yacht's powerful floodlights suddenly shut off, plunging the deck into near-total darkness. The music died with a scratch. The guests gasped a collective sound of confusion and fear. And into the silence came a new sound, the thump, thump, thump of heavy-duty marine engines and the unfamiliar, terrifyingly calm voice of a woman on a megaphone. "This is the Newport Beach Police Department. By the authority of the U.S. Coast Guard, this vessel is hereby boarded. All engines off. No one is to leave the yacht." Blue and red lights flashed, strobing across the deck, catching the guests in frozen tableaus of fear. Arthur froze at the gangplank, his hand still clamped on Bella's arm. He was trapped. A Coast Guard cutter, a massive grey behemoth, was blocking the yacht's path to the open sea, and pulling up alongside a smaller, faster police launch was preparing to board. At the bow of the launch stood Detective Mariah Carras, her hand on her hip. Beside her, Marcus Thorne, holding a briefcase like a weapon. And behind them, a figure stepped out of the shadows. It was Eleanor. She wore a tailored dark blue power suit. Her hair was perfect. Her expression was serene. She looked up at her husband, stranded on his deck of sin, and her eyes were as cold and deep as the Pacific Ocean. The thud of the police launch hitting the hull was the sound of the guillotine dropping. A heavy boarding ramp was thrown across, and Detective Carras was the first one on deck, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. The partygoers, moments before a sea of decadent laughter, were now a silent, terrified audience. They parted like the Red Sea as Carras walked directly toward Arthur. "Arthur Vance." Carras's voice was sharp, cutting through the stunned silence. "What is the meaning of this?" Arthur blustered, finally finding his voice. He tried to puff himself up, to radiate the authority, that had always protected him. "This is a private party. I know the chief of police. I demand you leave my vessel immediately." "This vessel is now a crime scene, Mr. Vance," Kara said, ignoring his threats. "And you don't know the chief as well as you think you do. He signed the warrant." Arthur's face went white. "Warrant for what? A noise complaint." "That's enough," Kara said. "No one moves. No one touches their phones." Her eyes scanned the crowd and landed on Ben Harrington and the other investor, who were trying to sidle away toward the back of the yacht. "You two," Kara sparked. "Mr. Harrington, Mr. Cho, don't move. We'll have plenty of questions for you." They froze, their faces ashen. The net was larger than Arthur had realized, and then Marcus Thorne and Eleanor Vance stepped onto the deck. The air crackled. This was no longer a police action. It was a public execution. Eleanor walked past the stunned guests, her heels clicking on the teak deck. She didn't look at any of them. Her eyes were locked on her husband. Bella Rossi was the first to break. The sight of Eleanor, not in tears, not in hysterics, but in a suit with the police, shattered her composure. "Eleanor!" She shrieked, her voice high and panicked. "What are you doing? Are you insane? You're embarrassing yourself. Tell them to leave." Eleanor didn't even glance at her. She stopped 5 feet from Arthur. Arthur stared at her, his mind racing, trying to find a move, an angle, a way out. There was none. The arrogance and charm were gone, replaced by a raw, naked panic. "Eleanor." "What is this?" He tried attempting a softer tone. This is some misunderstanding. A fight about Bella. You're going to ruin us, Eleanor. You're going to ruin me, all because you're jealous." This was his last play to paint her as the hysterical, scorned wife. Eleanor let the silence stretch. She looked at him, truly looked at him, and felt nothing. Just a vast, cold pity. "Us, Arthur," she finally said, her voice clear and calm, carrying to every corner of the deck. "There is no us. There is only you, a thief, and me, the woman who caught you." Arthur's face contorted in rage. You bitch! Get off my boat!" "That's the thing, Arthur," Eleanor said, allowing herself a small, cold smile. "It's not your boat." Marcus Thorne stepped forward, snapping open his briefcase. "Mr. Vance, this is an emergency court injunction, signed by Judge Peterson an hour ago. It freezes all your personal and corporate assets, pending a criminal investigation." "Investigation for what?" Arthur spat. "For this," Detective Karras said. She pulled the warrant from her jacket and unfolded it. "Arthur Vance, you are under arrest for 12 counts of wire fraud, 6 counts of embezzlement, 2 counts of conspiracy to commit fraud, and 1 count of aggravated identity theft." Karras nodded to her officers. "Cuff him." "Get your hands off me!" Arthur roared, trying to pull away, as the officers seized his arms. "You can't do this!" "Arthur Vance." "You were Arthur Vance," Marcus corrected him. The click of the handcuffs snapping shut was the loudest sound in the Newport harbor. The moment the steel touched his skin, Arthur's facade of power evaporated. He was just a man in a linen suit, his hands bound behind his back. He looked at Eleanor, his eyes burning with a desperate, pathetic hatred. "You did this," he hissed. "After everything I gave you, I made you someone. You were just a wallflower, living off your father's name. I built that company." "You ran my company," Eleanor corrected him, stepping closer. "You ran it into the ground while you were robbing it. My father built it, and I am the one who's saving it." "You'll regret this, Eleanor," he snarled. You'll be ruined. The stock will plummet. You'll have nothing. I'll have my self-respect, Eleanor said, and I'll still have 51% of the company. You'll have a cellmate, and that Patek Philippe, it's evidence. It was bought with stolen funds. An officer gently unclasped the £100,000 watch from Arthur's wrist and dropped it into an evidence bag. Arthur let out a choked animal sound. It was then that Bella Rossi, who had been frozen in horror, seemed to understand her own predicament. Her future as the Queen of Newport was vanishing. She scrambled, lunging not at Eleanor, but at Arthur. "You told me it was your money," she screamed, clawing at his suit. "You told me she was fine with the divorce. You told me it was all legal. You used me. Get off me, you gold-digging whore!" Arthur bellowed back, trying to twist away from her. "Ms. Isabella Rossi." Detective Karras said, her voice cutting through the sordid display. Bella froze. "Rossi Holdings, LLC. Registered in the Cayman Islands. Ring a bell?" Karras asked. Bella's eyes widened in genuine terror. I don't know what you're talking about. He just told me to sign some papers. It was for a business, for our future." "That business was a shell corporation, Ms. Rossi," Marcus Thorne interjected, holding up a file. "A shell corporation to which $37 million of stolen funds were illegally wired. And this," he held up another paper, "is the deed to a $4 million condo in Dubai, purchased in your name with that money. You're not just a mistress, Ms. Rossi. You're a co-conspirator." "No," Bella shrieked. "No, he tricked me. I'm a victim, Eleanor. Tell them I'm a victim." She turned to Eleanor, her eyes pleading, tears of mascara streaming down her face. "Please, Eleanor, I'm pregnant. You can't do this to me. He's the monster, not me." This was the final desperate card. The plea for feminine solidarity. Eleanor looked at the crying woman, the red Gucci dress, the fake tears. She remembered the email, "I'm tired of hiding." "Pregnant," Eleanor said, her voice flat. "Then I suppose you should have thought of that before you helped him steal the future of my 5,000 employees. You weren't tricked, Bella. You were a willing accomplice. You just bet on the wrong horse." Eleanor nodded to Karras. "Ms. Rossi," Karras said, "put your hands behind your back. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud and receiving stolen property." "No, please." Bella collapsed, sobbing, as a female officer pulled her to her feet and cuffed her. Her red dress was hiked up, her designer image ruined. "You can't do this, I'm an influencer. You'll be influencing the prison commissary," Karras said dryly. As Bella Rossi was hauled to her feet, her desperate sobs echoed across the deck. The fight had gone out of her, replaced by the hiccuping, gasping cries of someone whose entire world had just dissolved. "I didn't know," she whimpered over and over, a pathetic mantra that convinced no one. "He promised me. He promised." The female officer, unmoved, guided her toward the gangplank, her red Gucci dress now looking like a garish costume, a symbol of her spectacular failure. With Bella's exit, the full scope of the trap snapped shut on the remaining conspirators. The two investors, Ben Harrington and Michael Cho, who had been frozen in place, were now the center of attention for two other officers. "Gentlemen, I believe you have some questions to answer," Detective Karras said, nodding to them. "This is a grotesque misunderstanding." Harrington blurted out, his face slick with sweat. He tried to laugh, a high, panicked sound. "We're just guests. We were advising Arthur on a merger, that's all. It was a standard deal." Marcus Thorne stepped forward, his eyes like ice chips. He held up a single printed email. A standard deal. Mr. Harrington, is it also standard to accept a $2 million wire transfer to an untraceable shell company in Belize as an advisory fee? He held up a second paper. And Mr. Cho, your fee was the deed to a condo in Miami Beach. We have the wire confirmations. We have the forged signatures. You weren't advising him. You were his accomplices. Harrington's face crumpled. Cho, a quieter man, simply closed his eyes, defeated. We'll cooperate, Cho whispered. All of it. We'll tell you everything. I'm sure you will, Kara said, as her officers cuffed them. You have the right to remain silent. The rest of her words were lost, as the other guests, the sycophants, the fair-weather friends, began to panic. They saw the net widening and scrambled to distance themselves. I barely knew him, one woman who had been laughing at Bella's jokes an hour earlier told an officer. We just came for the party, another man insisted, grabbing his wife's hand. We had no idea about any of this business stuff. They were like rats tripping over one another to get off the yacht, to disavow the man they had been toasting as a king moments before. An officer stood at the gangplank, methodically taking each name and phone number. They were all witnesses now, accessories to the most spectacular social and financial execution in Newport Beach history. Through it all, Arthur Vance stood alone, his hands cuffed behind him. He watched Bella get led away. He watched Harrington and Cho turn on him in a heartbeat, and he watched his friends scatter. The fog of his arrogance was finally clearing, leaving only the cold, sharp reality of his ruin. His entire empire, his web of lies, his beautiful mistress, his future, all of it gone in 10 minutes. He turned his movements stiff and robotic to face the architect of it all. Eleanor was standing 10 feet away, watching him, not with hate, not with tears, but with a calm, almost curious detachment, as if studying a failed experiment. That look, her pity, was what finally broke him. You, he whispered, his voice a low, seething hiss. And then he lunged. It was a wild, desperate, primal roar of a man with nothing left. You'll pay for this! The officers were on him in a second, slamming him back against the yacht superstructure. The impact rattled a tray of glasses, but Arthur didn't feel it. He was a caged animal, straining against his restraints, his face purple with rage. You did this to me! He screamed, spittle flying from his mouth. You cold, empty bitch! You were nothing! A piece of furniture in my house. I gave you a life. I made you someone, and you ruined me for her. For a stupid intern. Eleanor didn't flinch. She took a slow, deliberate step toward him. The officers tensed, but she held up a hand. She would not be afraid of him. Not anymore. You're wrong, Arthur, she said, her voice a low, steady counterpoint to his screams. I didn't do this for her. I didn't even do this for me. I did this for my father. I did this for the 5,000 employees you were willing to destroy for a new condo and a 25-year-old. She stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. You think I was alone? You were so busy building your new life, you never noticed the one I was building. I wasn't alone. I had Mr. Chen, the boring accountant. You never bothered to learn the name of who cracked your private ledger in 6 hours. I had Marcus, the old fossil you tried to force into retirement, who built a case file so ironclad you will never see daylight again. I had Detective Karras, who it turns out really hates arrogant men who think they're above the law. She was inches from his face now, her voice dropping to a whisper that was more chilling than his screams. You mistook my kindness for weakness. You mistook my insolence for stupidity. You didn't just cheat on your wife, Arthur. You tried to rob a Vance, and we don't tolerate thieves." She leaned in her final words for him and him alone. "You thought you were a King Arthur. You're just a common thief in an expensive suit. And the dead weight you were so eager to cut, that was the anchor holding you to the world. Now you're just falling." She straightened her suit jacket, the picture of composure, and turned to the detective. "Take them away, Detective Karras. The deck needs to be cleaned." "Vessel is secure. Let's go." Karras nodded. Arthur said nothing else. The fight was gone, leaving a hollow, broken shell. He and his co-conspirators were frog-marched down the gangplank. On the dock it was pure chaos. The anonymous tip from Marcus had borne fruit. A wall of flashing cameras and shouting reporters greeted them. The strobing lights turned the humiliating walk into a living nightmare. "Arthur, did you steal the money? Bella, was it all a lie? Mr. Vance, how does it feel?" Arthur stumbled. His linen suit rumpled his face, a mask of shame. Bella, seeing the cameras, hid her face and began to wail, a truly pathetic sight. The King of Newport and his new queen were dragged away, not to a private jet, but to separate police cruisers, their new lives just beginning. On the yacht there was silence. The only sounds were the wind and the distant lapping of water. Eleanor stood alone on the deck now, a wasteland of half-eaten canapes and spilled champagne. Marcus came to stand beside her. "It's done," he said softly. "He'll be buried in a federal prison for 20 years, minimum." "Good," Eleanor said. She walked over to a table and picked up an untouched full flute of Dom Perignon. She looked at the bubbles for a long moment, then calmly poured the entire glass over the side of the yacht, a final symbolic cleansing. She set the empty flute down with a decisive click. "Marcus," she said, turning to him, her eyes already focused on the future, "have someone clean this up and sell the boat. I never liked it." She started walking toward the gangplank, not looking back. "And Marcus, yes, Eleanor, send a memo to the board. Emergency meeting, 9 a.m. tomorrow, my office." The trial of Arthur Vance was the social and financial event of the season, a media circus that the press gleefully dubbed the Billionaire's betrayal. Every day, Eleanor Vance walked into the courthouse impeccable in a series of severe dark suits, her face a mask of iron composure. She was the state's star witness. On the other side of the room, Arthur, now gaunt and stripped of his designer suits and arrogant charm, looked like a hollowed-out version of his former self. He was a defendant. She was an executioner. His expensive legal team tried every trick. They painted Eleanor as a vengeful, scorned woman, a hysterical wife who had fabricated a complex financial conspiracy to punish him for a simple affair. It fell apart on the stand. Mr. Chen's digital evidence was irrefutable, a perfect, damning timeline of theft. The two investors, Harrington and Cho, having turned state's evidence for a lighter sentence, laid out the entire conspiracy email by email. But the most devastating testimony came from Bella Rossi. She entered the courtroom not in Gucci red, but in a plain beige blouse, her hair in a mousy ponytail, tears already welling. She was playing her final role, the ultimate victim. She wept. She pointed at Arthur. She claimed she was a pawn in his monstrous game. "He made me do it all," she cried. "He told me the money was his, a private fund. He promised me a new life. He said she didn't care about him anymore." The performance was compelling right up until Arthur's own lawyer, in a desperate attempt to discredit her, began his cross-examination. "Ms. Rossi, you told my client you were pregnant, did you not?" Was that also part of his master plan? Bella's face froze. The courtroom went silent. She stammered. I thought I was. It was a mistake. A mistake, the lawyer pressed. Or was it a lie, Ms. Rossi? A calculated lie to pressure my client into leaving his wife faster. A lie to secure your own financial future. Bella collapsed into sobs. Her performance shattered. It was the truth. The pregnancy had been a fabrication, a final manipulative card she had played. The jury saw it all. Not a victim, but a failed co-conspirator, just as ruthless and greedy as the man she was trying to blame. The jury was out for less than 2 hours. The verdict was a formality. Guilty. On all 17 counts. At the sentencing, the judge looked down at Arthur with open contempt. "Mr. Vance," he said, his voice booming in the silent room, "you are a man of immense privilege. You had a respected name, a powerful company, and a family. You had everything. And you gambled it all, not out of need, but out of a profound, bottomless arrogance. You chose the path of a common con artist. You didn't just steal money. You betrayed the trust of your family and the livelihoods of 5,000 employees who depended on you." He paused. "This court sentences you to the maximum allowable 25 years in federal prison." Arthur let out a sound, a choked, strangled gasp, and visibly sagged as if his strings had been cut. He was no longer a king. He was an inmate. Bella Rossi, for her limited cooperation, received 3 years for conspiracy. The story was over for them. But for Eleanor, it was just beginning. As Arthur had predicted, the stock for Vance Global Logistics had tanked. The moment the cuffs had snapped on his wrist, the company's market cap had plummeted by 40%. The company was hemorrhaging money and credibility. The board, the same men who had clapped Arthur on the back, was in a full-blown panic. They called an emergency meeting. Eleanor Vance walked into the 30th floor boardroom at 9:00 a.m. sharp. The remaining board members, the ones not facing their own indictments, looked at her with a new terrified respect. A man named Henderson, the oldest member, cleared his throat. "Eleanor, Mrs. Vance, this is a catastrophe. We've lost $200 million in market cap. We're facing shareholder lawsuits. We have no CEO. We have no credibility. Frankly, our only move is an emergency sale. We need to find a buyer, liquidate, and salvage what we can." The other men nodded grimly. Eleanor, standing at the head of the table, was silent for a long moment. Then she said one word. "No." It was quiet, but it landed like a thunderclap. "Excuse me," Henderson stammered. "There will be no sale." Eleanor repeated, her voice cutting through the room. "Vance Global is not for sale." Another board member, Davies, scoffed. "Eleanor, with all due respect, you've spent the last decade running charity auctions. This is a billion-dollar logistics empire on the verge of collapse. We need a real CEO. Someone who can... A real so, Eleanor interrupted. She dropped a thick, spiral-bound binder onto the table. It landed with a heavy, definitive thud. "For 10 years, she said, her voice low and dangerous. "You all looked at me as Arthur's wife. You patted my head. You complimented my garden parties. And while you were all doing that, I was listening. I was reading every quarterly report you signed off on, without a second thought. I was watching as you let my husband, the man you called a genius, hollow out my father's company with consulting fees and shell corporations. You didn't just fail the company. You failed your one job to watch." She looked at every face. "This," she tapped the binder, "is my 100-day plan. Effective immediately, the corporate jet is sold. The New York penthouse is on the market. All consulting contracts initiated by Arthur Vance are permanently terminated. Marcus Thorne is our new acting chief counsel, and David Chen, the man who actually found the rot you all ignored, is our new head of auditing and cybersecurity. She looked directly at Davis. You thought I was fragile. You thought I was dead weight. My father built this company on reliability. My husband nearly destroyed it with arrogance. As of this moment, I am the acting CEO and majority shareholder. You will either get in line or you will get out of my way. No one said a word. The king was gone. The queen had taken the throne. 6 months later, Eleanor stood at the same panoramic window in her new office, the CEO's office. The press had a new name for her, the Iron Vance. Her first act as CEO had been to fly commercial in coach to Singapore to personally meet with the shipping conglomerate Arthur had nearly lost. She saved the $300 million contract in a single meeting. The stock was already up 15%. She sipped her morning coffee, looking down at the Newport harbor. It was 6:00 a.m., and she was, as always, the first one in the slip where the Serenity used to be. A new, sleeker, more practical vessel was docked. It was named the James V after her father. It was a working ship, not a party boat. Her phone buzzed on the desk. A standard notification from the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Subject inmate status change. Vance Arthur, but 7789011. Transferred to USP, Victorville. It was a digital ghost, a reminder of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. She looked at the message for a long, cold second, seeing not a man, but a mistake. She pressed delete. Eleanor Vance turned back to the window, watching the sun rise over her harbor. She had work to do. And just like that, Eleanor Vance didn't just get her revenge, she got her company back. She proved that being underestimated is the ultimate weapon. The king was dethroned, the mistress was exposed, and the true queen finally took her seat at the head of the table. What did you think of Eleanor's takedown? Was it justice, or was it cold-blooded? Let me know in the comments below what your favorite twist was. If you loved this story and want more tales of dramatic takedowns and shocking real-life karma, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss an upload. And if you have a story you think we should tell, share it with us. Thanks for watching.